So in this tutorial, we'll take a look at some simple techniques for managing files and folders using the built-in Windows File Manager, Windows Explorer. Windows Explorer is not the same thing as Internet Explorer. Windows Explorer is a built-in file utility that comes with Windows. We're going to be using Windows XP. However, Windows Vista and other versions of Windows use a very similar technique and approach to managing files and folders. Regardless of the operating system or computer platform file system that you're using, the ability to manage files and folders is a critical and important skill. Okay, so let's talk about zipped files to start, and then we'll use Windows Explorer to manage and do some specific tasks using some existing collection of files and folders. So a zipped file is actually usually a collection of files, usually two or more files, and or folders that are compressed into a single file, and it's a very convenient way to be able to move multiple files. Now there is compression, which means that there is some space savings for zipping a file, but that's not the primary reason that we zip a file. These days it's more a matter of convenience, of being able to take maybe 50 or 100 files, compress them all together into a single file, which then can be moved across the internet. Maybe it's 5 files, 10 files, maybe it's 5 folders with different files within them that you want to actually package up and then move across the network or the internet, or in some other ways move them. Okay, so I'm just taking a look here. What we have a lab file zipped file, and we don't, of course, know what's in it yet, but I can see that the size here is 690 kilobytes, so it's about half a megabyte. And this is on the internet somewhere, and I'm going to first of all download this zip file. So that's going to be the first step. So once you find the zip file that you're wanting to download, and this might be in a email attachment or in some other location, I'm just using this as an example. I'm going to, and it'll vary based on your browser. I'm using Internet Explorer here as my browser, but I'm going to point to the file that I want to download on the internet that ends in .zip, and I'm going to right click on it, and then I want to save the target as, and it'll be some kind of similar terminology if you're using a different browser, but it should be very similar. So I right click and then I left click on Save Target As, and then I need to save it to a location, and I'm going to browse, in my case, to my flash drive, which is removable disk. That's the G drive for me. And notice that the name of the file is lab files, and it ends in .zip. And I've got some other folders here on my flash drive, including some zipped folders that has a little zipper on them. I use zipped folders, for example, in Blackboard. When we download tests, they are downloaded as a compressed zipped file, which is the way we move it from one place to another in the Blackboard environment. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on Save, but again, you would navigate to the location where you want to save it to. Now this is a little bit confusing. Once I've downloaded it, I'm going to actually go ahead and go to Windows Explorer, and the way I do that is I hold the Windows key, which is the little logo down by the Control-Alt key, the Windows key, and hold E. So I hold down that Windows key and then tap the E key, or you can right click down here on Start and you can Explore All Users or Explore. I'm going to go ahead and I guess I can do it that way. And here we go. I've got something that's going to look something like this that will allow me to navigate through the different folders on my computer. And I'm going to immediately go to my removable disk, the G drive, and I can see that I've downloaded the lab files. Remember, when I right clicked, here it is, lab files, and it's got the zipper on it. So the first thing we need to do is unzip these compressed files. This is kind of one of the first places that people get confused and intimidated when working with zipped files. By the way, you might have to change, the view here. You might have list, and I'm just going to go back and do it as tiles. All right, lab file. So what I'm going to do here is you can right click on this and see if it gives you an option to extract, or you can double click on it. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'll go ahead and select it, and then I'm going to click on extract all. Right, in Windows Vista does this a little bit differently, but you should be able to find the button that will indicate extraction of the files. That means uncompress them and take it from the zipped single file to a collection of files and folders. So I'm going to go ahead and extract all, and then I'm going to go ahead and go into this, and it's going to define or suggest a location called lab files in the root of wherever we were, and this is going to create a new folder when it unzips it called lab files. Now you can create a new folder with a different name, but we'll just go with the default. I'm going to go next. Hello, is my computer. All right, there we go. And it's extracting that, and if it's a big zipped file, it may take longer, and it says go ahead and show the extracted files. I'm going to click finish. So now I see that I have a file, not with a zipper, but a file that says lab files. I'm going to go ahead and move up one level in the directory tree so I can kind of see where I'm at. And you can see that the zipped folder is still here, but now I have a file that says lab files. Notice that it's bigger, 853 versus 691. So when it was compressed, right, there was some savings. And it's not insignificant. I don't know, 15-20%, right? It's not unusual. Between 700 here and 850. That's a pretty good savings. That's probably approaching 20%. I don't really need the zipped folder anymore. This is part of the confusion. Some people will try to work with the lab files. Once I've unzipped it, then here where it says lab files, this is where I'm going to do any work, and then when I'm done, I'll zip up my result. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and double click on lab files, not the one that has the zipper on it, but the new one. And then inside of that, there's a folder called lab files, because we actually unzipped lab files and put it into a folder called lab files. So that's a little bit confusing, where you have a folder inside of a folder with the same name. I'm going to go ahead and drill into this, and I have candidate files and final files. Let's take a look at what's in candidate files. I've got flags and maps. Looks like there's some images in there. Some images in there. And you'll notice that it looks like I've got different countries. I'm again using the arrow keys. I can navigate. Rather than working in final files, which may be part of a lab that you're working on, I'm going to create a third folder here called practice, and then we're going to try to create a couple of folders, or at least one folder in that, and try copying and moving some files from the candidate files over to the folder over here. The best thing you can do is to simply practice with this and get comfortable with creating and moving and removing and erasing files and folders using a data set that isn't real data that's going to get lost or something like that. Okay, so the tricky thing in all of this is making sure that when we issue a command that we're doing it at the right place in the tree. In the directory structure. So I'm in lab files here. I've selected that, and I'm going to let me go ahead and I want to hold on a second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I just realized that this may be a little bit confusing in that I'm not showing the directory tree over here, and that may be what some of you who try this are seeing. So I'm going to click on there's different views to looking at Internet or Windows Explorer here. I'm going to click on the folders item here. And this gives me a view where I can kind of see where I am in context. And I think this shows it a little more clearly that I actually have a folder here called lab files, and inside of that is lab files, and then inside of that is the candidate files, and then inside of that is the flags, and then I want to create a folder called practice files, right, that's inside of the lab files. So I'm going to come up here and click on lab files at the point where I want the new folder to be. That's the trick. That's what I was trying to emphasize. And I can come up here to file, right, and then click on new folder. And you see what it's going to do is it'll allow me to create a new folder. So you can create new folders at any point in your directory structure, and I was going to call this practice. Now if I come here and double click on practice, we can see that there's nothing there because it's a new folder. And again, I can come over here and click on this once if I want to highlight it. I could now create inside of practice a folder, say, called China. And again, I'd come up here to file, and then I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it China. And so the idea here is, and I'll hit enter, I've created a folder called China, and it's inside of practice, right? And I can click here to see that. I need to get the Chinese flag and the Chinese map from the flags and maps folder to the China folder. Does that make sense? So I'm going to need to be able to do some either copy or move. So I'm going to go ahead here, and again, this is probably the easiest way to kind of view this. If I go to double click on flags, right, I can see my flags. You may need to navigate over here to open up so you can see the folder where you want to move it to. If I drag and drop this file over to China, it's going to actually move it. The reason why is because we're in the same drive. If you drag and drop to a different drive, like from the C drive to the flash drive, then it will actually make a copy of it. So what you'll want to do is, simplest way is when you drag and drop the files that you want to move so that it actually copies them, you hold the control key if you're working on the same drive. So I'm going to hold the control key down. I've pressed the control key. Now I can drag this over, and notice there's a little plus there by my icon, by my pointer, and I'm going to drop. And then I can come over here, click on China, and sure enough, there's the China flag, right? And then I'm going to come back over to Maps, and then I want the China map, and again I'm going to hold the control key and I'm going to drag this over to there. There we go. Now we have the Chinese map and the Chinese flag. And if I wanted to create a new folder, say called France, then I would come up to the, I don't want to create France inside of China, so I come up, click on practice, then this is the place where I want to create the new folder, and then I would come up to file new. Okay, let's do just two more things, and then we'll zip this up, literally. I'm going to go to Final Files, and there's a folder called PDF Files. I'm going to double click on that, and I just want to talk about erasing and renaming files. So I'm going to rename Global to World Map. I'm going to point to it, and then I can delete it or rename it. And you can also copy or cut it and then go to another location and copy and paste it. So you might want to try that. I'm going to rename, and I'll call this World Map. Hit enter. Keeps the same extension, so now it's World Map. And let's say South Asia, if I want to delete that folder, I would right click and delete. Yes, I want to delete. Okay, and if I wanted to move World Map over to the practice folder, as an example, I would hold the control key and then just drag and drop it at the location where I want. And then I always think it's a good idea, right, to go in and did I do that right? Let me try that again. I was in PDF Files, and I'm going to take World Map, and I'm going to drag it to Practice. Okay, and there it is. And in China, I've got the China map and China flag. Okay, in all of this, if I want to zip up a particular folder or subfolder to be able to send off, right, as a, maybe an outcome for a lab or just a bunch of pictures you want to send to your mother-in-law or something, you want to find the folder which you want to zip up. In this case, it's going to be lab files. I'm going to drill into practice. I'm going to click on practice. That's the folder that I actually want to turn into a zip folder. And then you simply right-click on that folder, and then you click on Send to Compressed Folder. and that should have created a folder called, let's take a look what we did here. It's in lab files, and there it is, practice. And notice it put it at the same spot where practice was. And that's the kind of the default, and that's a little bit confusing because then you may have to go find that zipped folder. But that zipped folder then is just like any other file or folder. You can move it to somewhere else, right? I can move that to the desktop, or maybe I want to move that to the root. So again, I could hold the control and then drag this to my removable drive over here. And now I should have a copy here called practice. So this could then be the file I could attach in an email or in Blackboard to send. And then the person on the other end is going to have to do the same thing that we just did. They're going to have to extract it, right, to unzip it, and then they can work with the folders in files in that way. Okay, hopefully that's a good introduction to the basics of downloading a zip folder, how to extract the contents of the zip folder, and then just very simple how to create a folder, how to copy, rename, and erase files, and how to create folders.